It is 9:30 sharp, and we would like to get started on time. I know we still have people joining us, but we are going to go ahead and start the broadcast today. I will, just a couple things. If in fact you unmute your phone, please make sure you mute it again. I do have everyone on mute, so you'd have to enter your PIN. If you do have any questions, probably the best thing so we can keep the broadcast moving forward is go ahead and email HR and we will answer any questions that you have as it relates to the environment and culture that we're trying to promote, in addition to any of the information that is shared today. Secondly, I will get through some introductions here in just a second before we present our guest speaker, but we do want to just refer back to why are we here today. Why we are here today is our culture. Our world around us is changing every day. Gender-neutral bathrooms, same-sex marriages, Caitlin, I think everyone has heard of the Caitlin. And so we want to get ahead of what a lot of employers are doing right now, which is just a refresher of respectful workplace training. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that everyone is crystal clear on what our policies are. And policies are policies, but we want to make sure our culture is that of inclusion. So there is a zero tolerance policy for harassment, zero tolerance policy for any type of discrimination within the workforce. Of course, theft, drugs, alcohol in the workplace, that's kind of a given with any employer. So we're really focusing today on the discrimination, harassment, but most importantly, we're focusing on acceptance, understanding, and of course, the no harassment and discrimination within our company. If you do have any questions on that, please don't hesitate to ask your manager or contact HR at. Hopefully, each one of our managers have got everyone together to go through the harassment and discrimination program prior to attending today's broadcast on respectful workplace. Without further ado, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Kathy Scoff with Ataraxis. I always get that wrong, but Ataraxis. Kathy and her company, they do training throughout the nation on respectful workplace training, development, organizational development. So they're very well versed in this type of platform on respectful workplace. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it right over to Kim. Kim?
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here to talk to you this morning about creating a respectful workplace. What we're really talking about here is cultural or social sensitivity. When you introduce the topic of sensitivity training, you get a lot of reactions, most of which are negative. If you Google it today, you're going to see that Donald Trump was recently offered sensitivity training after appearing to mock a disabled reporter. The NYPD, our nation's largest police force, is using theater, believe it or not, to train recruits in social sensitivity. A PR agency, the day after the suicide of actor Robin Williams, with a blog post called Carpe Diem, and the author calling Williams' death a Carpe Diem moment, an opportunity to engage in a national conversation on depression. Keep going and you'll see both prosecutors and judges who get sensitivity training in response to their actions. So it allows me to question, is sensitivity training a consequence? When sensitivity training first came about, it wasn't well received. In 2000, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, gave sensitivity training, and the course failed miserably. The employees said it was condescending and one-sided. Many employees felt that only certain ones of them were being asked to be sensitive to the others. People can become so sensitive to others that they walk on eggshells around them and whisper about the person they need to be nicer to. You'll see today that what I'm advocating for is actually developing a higher level of knowledge of the dimensions of diversity in order to better understand the world, your country, your colleagues, and your friends. We won't worry so much about being sensitive that we're even afraid of the differences we discover today. or ask a question. You will see that the key to creating a respectful workplace is not removing these differences between individuals, groups, and cultures, but in fact, it's honoring them. So we have some objectives today. We want to develop an awareness of our biases, learn about different groups and cultures, acquire skills to show sensitivity and acceptance, look at our own individual competence, and make a commitment to creating a respectful workplace. A few guiding principles. Our theme today will be, you don't know what you don't know. So I want you to consider this today. If something comes up and you think, I didn't know what I didn't know, I'd like you to acknowledge that to yourself. Our other guiding principles are just to be present, be kind, and be curious. To begin, we want to develop an awareness of our existing biases. Here you can see a few common stereotypes. We have jobs listed down the left-hand side, and when you think about it, think of a delivery driver. Usually you think male, nurse, female. We can stereotype people even in terms of their politics, hobbies, or the car they drive. Police officers buy donuts and coffee, another example of perceived stereotypical behavior in the U.S. A stereotype is an exaggerated belief or a generalization about a group or a person. Stereotypes can be positive or negative. When we look at differences, we can avoid stereotyping and generalizing by looking at the variations that always exist within each group or culture. For instance, in the United States, if you schedule a meeting at 9 a.m., some will arrive 10 minutes early, some will arrive 10 minutes late. The majority, though, will probably arrive right on time at 9 a.m. Looking at it this way, we can avoid stereotyping and making claims that all people from a certain culture do things in a certain way. Why do we stereotype? We learn stereotypes from parents, our first and most influential teachers, peers, and the media. Another explanation is that it's just too difficult to take in all of the complexities of other people as individuals. We like to, want to, need to categorize the world we live in into groups because it's efficient. Once you've categorized, you no longer have to consider that information individually. It saves processing time, and it satisfies our need to understand and predict the world. From an evolutionary perspective, we're hardwired to categorize so that we can respond quickly or make a snap judgment about a predator. We're wired to stereotype automatically. In addition to stereotypes, many other cultural barriers and beliefs exist in our workplaces. We have strong regional or national accents and slang that can produce many misunderstandings. Social hierarchies can create bumps in communication in the workplace. Women are subordinate to men in some countries and may have a hard time looking a man in the eye. Males from this background may have a hard time adjusting to a female supervisor. We have 5 different generations in the workplace today with widely differing views of the world.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Americans also tend to stand about 5 feet apart when communicating. Japanese prefer more personal space, and Latinos tend to like to get closer. These nuances in personal space can help communications tremendously. What about body language? Body language is interpreted differently around the world. In America, we say no by shaking our head. In some countries, people raise their chins. In America, avoiding eye contact is a sign of evasiveness. In some countries, it's a sign of respect. I've worked with people who pray 3 times a day at work in agreement with their values and beliefs. Hygiene, grooming, eating habits, attire can vary from country to country and culture to culture. Once we've developed awareness, we can grow our social sensitivity with knowledge. In business, diversity means including different kinds of people. We commonly think of gender, age, and race when we think about diversity. But it's not just about people. It's about ideas, and the ability to communicate those ideas in a safe environment. It can include someone's nationality, their sexual orientation, even their specific communication style. Let's look at diversity in our workplace. Our U.S. workforce is undoubtedly becoming more diverse. The proportion of people of color participating in the workforce will only increase as the United States becomes a more racially and ethnically diverse country. Census data tells us that by 2050, there will be no racial or ethnic majority in our country. Further, between 2000 and 2050, new immigrants and their children will be accounting for about 83% of the growth in the working age population. Today, women make up 47% of the labor force. This is up from about 29% in 1950. Just over 1 million gay or transgender individuals work in the public sector, and about 7 million workers in the private sector are gay or transgender. 11% of Americans have a disability, yet only 21% of these are in the labor force, a population underutilized in our workforce today. We unfortunately see a lack of diversity in our corporate boardrooms. Looking specifically at Fortune 500 CEOs, only 4% are people of color and 3% are female. But diversity is not lacking among our business owners. People of color own 22% of all U.S. businesses, and women own 28%. Okay, I want you to think for a minute and listen as I read the following list. Just make a note mentally or on your piece of paper if any of these apply to you. Are you female? Are you 40 years of age or older? Have you conceived a child or become a parent while employed? Have you ever been denied health insurance because of your family medical history? Was your ancestors' home from a non-Northern European country? Are you a male under 5'5"? Do you weigh more than 200 pounds? Do you experience depression or another mental health concern? Did you grow up speaking a language other than English? Do you have a physical limitation? Are you a veteran? If any of these terms apply to you, you belong to a group that has been discriminated against in the workplace, regardless of your qualification or your ability to perform a job. In the U.S., federal anti-discrimination laws identify protected classes of characteristics and prohibit individuals with these characteristics from being discriminated against in employment decisions. And these are listed on your screen. Currently, the laws we just discussed prohibiting discrimination of protected classes in employment decisions does not include the terms sexual orientation or gender identity as protected classes. However, the EEOC, an agency which handles discrimination claims, states if one is discriminated against for their sexual orientation or gender identity, that person can file a claim under the protected class sex, as this may represent adverse action taken because of a person's nonconformance with sex stereotypes. This map represents 18 states and Washington, D.C. that have passed laws prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in employment decisions. While many people may be familiar with the terms that denote sexual orientation, such as straight, gay, lesbian, or bisexual, they may be less familiar with terms like transgender or gender identity. Transgender is an umbrella term referring to a person whose gender identity or gender presentation falls outside of stereotypical gender norms. Transgender people live all or a substantial portion of their lives expressing an innate sense of gender other than their birth sex. Transgender is only one example of terminology you may encounter in the workplace related to a person's gender identity. Today, we're defining culture rather broadly. We're talking about ability, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, Merriam-Webster offers 6 different definitions of culture and announced the word culture as its 2014 word of the year because it saw the biggest spike in lookups that year on their website. It goes without saying that culture is a confusing word. Culture is not homogeneous. You will always be able to find a contradiction. Remember our 9 o'clock meeting. It's not uniformly applied to all members of a group. An individual might have more than one culture. It's not a custom, a tradition, and it's not timeless. It is associated with social groups, and it's constantly changing. It's busy. Members are unlikely to share identical sets of attitudes, beliefs, and so on, but you might see resemblances. Well, culture is hard to define, so what is social sensitivity? I think of it as 3 different levels. Initially, a person demonstrates social sensitivity by being aware that differences and similarities between people exist without assigning them a value, positive or negative, better or worse, right or wrong. It simply means you're aware that people are not all the same, and you recognize that your characteristics are no better than the characteristics of another person, culture, or group.
But since we do as humans make those snap decisions, we may not be indifferent to it.
Yep.
We may make a negative,
attention.
It may be a negative connotation, a positive connotation, but usually it's one or
That's
the other.
Stereotypes of things, biases. Yes. Once you move beyond noticing those differences, social sensitivity is really sensing what others feel and think from their own point of view. And when you can adjust yourself and your behavior more suitably in light of that understanding, you're at the highest level of demonstrating social sensitivity. Ideally, you can maintain your own culture or group characteristics while recognizing the value that other cultures, groups, and individuals bring. Now we're ready to acquire some skills to develop a respectful workplace. You might be thinking, I want to judge people rationally, not based on some bias I developed as a child, or I want to understand the real value of the person sitting across the table from me, rather than make a shallow stereotypical judgment. One of the first things we can do is to develop our critical thinking skills to move beyond stereotypes, biases, cultural barriers, and beliefs. Without thinking critically, you're really only looking at the surface of things. This happened with me just the other day. I saw a post on Facebook. I laughed, and I agreed with it. I almost hit share to private message it to a friend. The first thing we have to do is recognize our assumption. I assumed this post was accurate, and I made this assumption primarily because I agreed with the content. Assumptions can be based on our experiences, our values, a triggered emotion, many other influences listed up here. After we recognize our assumptions, we ask questions like, what's the source of the information? Does the source generally produce accurate information? Does the source have a bias or a purpose that would lead it to slant its information or outright lie? Does anyone in particular stand to benefit or lose if the information is accepted or rejected? I actually did this on this particular Facebook post and found that it wasn't even a true report. It was even on Snopes.com. Thankfully, I didn't share and did some critical thinking. Have you ever known someone who has a knack for connecting with people? No matter who this person meets, he or she manages to create a sense of trust and understanding within a matter of minutes. This person is good at building rapport. It's impossible to dislike a person who is good at building rapport, at least upon initially meeting them. Rapport is building trust and understanding. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but that you understand where the person is coming from. To begin, it's good to know how to break the ice, to reduce tension. Bring up safe topics for small talk. Avoid talking too much about you or too much about them. Next, find some common ground, anything. Hobbies, where you're from, likes, dislikes. You can use mirroring. Adjust your own body language or speech so that you reflect that of the person you're talking to. Listen for their pace, whether they lean forward or back, the tone, their volume, and mirror that. Show some empathy. Demonstrate that you can see the other person's point of view. Sometimes when you ask people to define empathy, they'll define sympathy instead. Empathy is feeling with people. Sympathy is feeling for them. Let me paint you a picture. Someone's in a deep hole, dark. They yell out, "I'm stuck, it's dark, and I'm overwhelmed down here." And I look down in the deep dark hole. I see a ladder. I climb down and I say, "Hey, I know what it's like down here. You're not alone." That's empathy. Sympathy is I look down into the deep dark hole and hear the person saying that they're stuck in the dark and overwhelmed. I see the dark and I say, "Oh, it is bad down there." I glance at the ladder and I say, "Nope, not going down it." But I ask the person, "I can bring you a sandwich. Do you want a sandwich?" Empathy doesn't start with understanding the other person. It starts with understanding yourself. You have to connect with them. In sympathy, we try to make things better. In empathy, we just connect. Finally, remember, a smile is a smile in any language. So an employee called me at work several years back who'd been out on leave and said, "I'm going home from the hospital today." I thought, that is so great. She must be better. I said, "That's so great. I'm so happy for you." There was, in fact, nothing doctors could do for this person. They were going home to hospice and not coming back to work. That was my own stuff spilling over to her and my embarrassment. "I'm going home from the hospital today" may mean I don't know where my next meal is coming from. "I'm going home from the hospital today" may mean I'm going into an experience of domestic violence. We don't know what "I'm going home from the hospital today" means. What we're talking about here is suspension of judgment. It's a mental process where you withhold judgment, particularly about a moral or an ethical conclusion. The first step is awareness. You have to become aware of the areas where you're likely to harbor false beliefs. For example, if someone says, "I'm in my 9th month of pregnancy," I'm going to immediately associate that statement with my own 9th month of pregnancy, which was frankly terrible. And I might say, "Oh, you poor thing, you must be miserable." And that may not be this person's experience at all. So the key is, when you catch yourself voicing a strong opinion on a subject, that's your indicator that you need to pause for a moment and check in with yourself. Ask, what specific knowledge are you basing your opinion on? Are you voicing an opinion just to be opinionated? Or are you sharing information of value? Is your ego getting in the way? What comes up if you ask yourself, what else might be true? And at this time, you can take a step back, release your attachment to that opinion, and open yourself to new ideas. When we can apply awareness, knowledge, and skills, we can create perspective and identify our current attitude. A.G. Lafley, the most recent CEO at Procter & Gamble, said, "A diverse organization will outthink and outperform a homogeneous one every single time." Diversity truly has a strong positive impact on business and teams. It's no surprise that diversifying our workplaces helps businesses increase market share. When you look at companies, 321 large global enterprises surveyed in 2011, 85% of them agreed that diversity is crucial to fostering innovation in the workplace. Why does it work? A mix of gender, ethnic, and racial backgrounds, nationality, sexual orientation, age, socioeconomic background, among other things, brings different perspectives, experiences to business that can challenge the status quo and group think with insights that can help identify new market opportunities. Now I want to look at the cultural competence continuum. We're going to try and identify a little bit about where we stand here in terms of social and cultural sensitivity. I'm going to talk about these different areas, and I want you to describe them, and I want you to think about it. The first one is When you see the difference and you stomp it out. This is like seeing someone out on the playground in an elementary school saying, why are those Chinese children speaking Chinese on the playground? It's America. They need to speak English. That's red. Orange is when you see the difference and you make it wrong. Stereotypes are here, as well as discriminatory hiring practices. Girls are not as good as boys at math and science, for example. Yellow is when you see the difference, but you act like you don't. This is actually where most of us lie. We don't intend to be biased, yet we say things like, oh, just don't recognize their religion. We don't want to offend. We apply the dominant culture to everyone, ignoring unique differences. Green, see the difference and respond, but in a limited way. We might take a look at our reception area and be willing to make it more multicultural. A lot of people will be here after today. They'll have developed some awareness, knowledge, and begin to adapt. Blue, this is when you see the differences and you respond positively. You engage others, adapt your own behaviors. This is acceptance, respect. You understand the difference makes. This is suspending judgment.
Okay, I'm going to jump in just a quick second, Kathy, if you don't mind. I had an experience shopping for my daughter the other day, and I went into this shop in the mall, and here was a gentleman that had these ginormous plugs in their ears. They had these modifying, I guess, bell bars right above their eyebrows. I mean, you know, definitely some things going on all over his face and in his ears. And I had to step back for a second, and I remembered our training, and I go, okay, so the whole thing was don't sweep it under the carpet, talk about it. Mm-hmm. So he was helping me, and I said, you know, past what I'm shopping here for, tell me about it. I see all of your plugs and your, you know, what made you do that? And he told me a story about his sobriety, mm-hmm. and it represents to him when he looks in the mirror, I can do this. And he said, and that's what it took. And I've been sober for the last 6 years, and he was telling about what he was going to do next, and it was just, oh my gosh. And I walked out of there, and I think I was his new best friend because I asked the question. So it was very interesting.
Yeah. So what you did, Kathy, was critical thinking. I mean, yes. You know, knew that you had an assumption, or, you know, there's a whatever.
Absolutely.
And you didn't want to just look at the surface of it.
Right.
And so instead you asked questions, yeah. Critical thinking, and you found out a story, mm-hmm. which might be the reason or the background or the culture that brought this to light. Mm-hmm. Perfect. And the purple here is when you seek out the differences, actually hold them in high regard. You're not just accepting differences, you're esteeming them. For instance, someone says, you know, hey, when I heard you say that's so gay, I was upset because it's insulting to gay people. I know you didn't mean it that way. Using ridiculous or irrational or absurd might be a better way to make your point. So assess where you are. Cultural destructiveness is that first level. Cultural incapacity, cultural blindness, pre-competence, competence, and proficiency. It's a good time to just kind of take a peek and think about where you are in terms of this different cultural competency continuum. You can also assess your current state a little bit by looking at the self-quiz, the cultural competence self-quiz. There's no real right or wrong answers, no score at the bottom, but it's an opportunity to just take a look and think about different areas that would express cultural proficiency.
And the competency sheet that we sent out to all managers, and hopefully you have that in front of you. You don't need to do it now, but go ahead and in your spare time, go ahead and work through that, because it is an eye-opener. If you don't have it with you, no problem. Go ahead after the training today and ask your manager for that.
Great. So at this time, you might want to think about developing a personal action plan for yourself. Identify which level you're at and which level you want to progress to. We don't all have to get to purple right now. It takes time and learning and experiences, really, to get to that point. So determine what skills you might need. Do you want to work on critical thinking or suspending judgment or building rapport? Or determine what experiences you might need in order to gain there. Perhaps you're from a small town who doesn't have a lot of cultural or social diversity, and you want to explore and immerse yourself in other cultures in order to gain those experiences.
You know, I will add, just for a quick second, we did, after the last training, we had lots of emails come through about, oh my goodness, this was the material was just technology, of course, with our constraint there for audio, but emails coming in on the material and that type of thing. We'd definitely like to hear it for this one as well. But one of the most interesting ones that came through was, boy, we're in this small, very small town, and we do not get a lot of, there is just not a lot of exposure or diversity, and we have a lot of locations like that in our organization. So hopefully this gives you food for thought. And because, eventually, like for what, 2050, did you say? There will be no.
No. I mean, even just the silliest example, but I went to Hong Kong with my spouse on a business trip one time. I sat down and read the newspaper, and there was one page about Hong Kong, and the rest of the entire paper was about all of the rest of the world. And that's a little different than it is in the United States.
Exactly.
So, just different exposure can definitely broaden your perspective. So yeah, make a personal action plan. Share it with someone who you trust to hold you accountable. So I challenge you today to a call to action within the workforce. That means actively involving every employee's ideas, knowledge, perspectives, approaches, and styles to really maximize our business success. I want you to know that if you leave here today with one new skill, one new viewpoint, or one new way to appreciate the differences of others, you can make a difference. So I want to watch this video with you before we leave about the power of one.
Jen, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Great. I'm going to push play, and I'm hoping that everyone will be able to see it for this training. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, and hope you made you think, and you don't know what you don't know, and all of those great things. I appreciate the time this morning.
Thank you so much, Kathy. As I look at this video for the second time, I see it definitely through a different lens. But you know, as a group, as a company, as a culture going in hopefully one very focused direction for the betterment of the company and our culture and each other, we all have a part in that. So that one is we can all make a difference. Circling back around, we hope again that you've learned a little something, do some reflection, and I hope you felt that the training was time well spent, and you know, sometimes it's just a refresher for some of you. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear your feedback. Again, email it to HR or Kathy Brashear at Futura Title and Escrow. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a good day. Thank you.